Welcome to everyone to this SIEL conversation. Let me thank the SIEL leadership for the opportunity and for the platform. The event for today will be focusing on a series of topics that has been presented through a conference on international law in times of trade wars and global environmental problems, protection or protectionism, which was held at National Research University Higher School of Economics in Moscow, Russia, in collaboration with various partners, among those gLAWcal, Global Law Initiative for Sustainable Development in the United Kingdom, the American Society, and various other organizations. The paper is also part of this special issue, which has been published by the journal World Energy Law and Business, by Oxford University Press, were also funded by the European Union project, RUDN. And so the results of this special issue and the conversation we are going to have find the roots on these two activities, this conference in Moscow and this project. Without further delay, let me move to the conversation of today. We would like to start with the conversation will be happening with various questions, and the speakers will around the table will respond. The very first question I would like to ask to the speakers: how can the implementation of your ideas presented that you are going to present help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement goals? I would open the floor to the other speaker. Thank you. Maybe Daria Boklan, you would like to start. Daria Boklan for Higher School of Economics in Moscow. Thank you, Daria.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Thank you very much for this opportunity to start and generally to take part in this very interesting, albeit virtual event, but better in a virtual way than in no way. So yes, this question is very broad, and I would narrow this question and focused on the topic that was addressed specifically in my paper, which is devoted to trade in electricity under WTO and the Eurasian Economic Union law and compatibility of these two legal regimes. And to show its connection and possible contribution to the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals and Paris Agreement goals, we may rely at least on three facts. First, both preamble of the WTO agreement and preamble of the Treaty on Eurasian Economic Union explicitly acknowledges the objective of sustainable development. Second, the preamble of the Paris Agreement specifically refers to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which in its turn provides that measures taken to combat climate change should not constitute means of arbitrary or unjustifiable discrimination or disguised restriction to international trade. Hence, fulfillment of obligations enshrined in the Paris Agreement is closely connected with the fulfillment of obligations under the WTO agreement and PTAs like Treaty on Eurasian Economic Union. And third, trade in energy in general and in electricity in particular is closely connected with both obligations, with both sets of obligations under the trade agreements like WTO agreements and the Eurasian Economic Union Treaty and under the Paris Agreement. So here we have a kind of combination between trade and environment, between trade in electricity and combating climate change. Therefore, objectives and as for the contribution, possible contribution of our paper, we can focus on issue of compatibility between WTO law and EU law regarding trade in electricity and how it is connected with the Paris Agreement. We came to the conclusion that the technological features of electricity, for instance, such as reliance on fixed infrastructure and the limitation of network usage, requires special regulation of trade in electricity in both EU and international markets like the WTO law provides. And electricity is defined as good under the EU law. Alongside with that, WTO law, actually being part of the Eurasian Economic Union legal order, may potentially influence trade in electricity under the EU. And alongside with that, both WTO and EU law should be applied in the context of sustainable development, including goals of Paris Agreement. Therefore, we have such a legal pie of international legal norms regulating trade in electricity and combating climate change at the same time. And we have to address the compatibility of these legal regimes to achieve both sustainable development goals and Paris Agreement goals. That's very brief description of how our paper may contribute to sustainable development and Paris Agreement at the same time.
Thank you very much, Daria. I would like now to give the floor to our next speaker, from Catholic University in Taiwan, to give his perspective and thoughts on the very same question. So, how can implementation of your ideas outlined in the paper help achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement goals?
You're mute, Jean-Yves.
You need to mute.
Yeah, no. Yes. So, thank you, Paolo, for your question, and thank you, everyone, for participating to this talk together today. So as Paolo just said, I am an associate professor in FuJen University in Taiwan, and also associate researcher at the Center for French Center on Contemporary China. And my paper is about the philosophy of energy, which is a kind of a new field actually in environmental philosophy. And I would say it's kind of a specification of environmental philosophy, a frame from the perspective of energy and energy production, energy consumption. And but before to really come to the bulk of the paper, I just would like to raise awareness of the difficulty to actually define what you name as sustainable goals in themselves. So it's kind of, yeah, I mean, you have to answer a question, but then you have also to frame the question. So if I look at the Sustainable Development Goals defined at the UN level, actually you have 17 different goals. And you can say that even if each of one is, I will say, interesting and important to achieve, you can wonder sometimes if there is not so much discrepancy and inconsistency or difficulty to achieve all of them at the same time. And of course, especially if we look at some of the goals that are linked directly to our special issue and to our talk today. So if you look at the 8th goal of Sustainable Development Goals, which is decent work and economic growth. And of course, economic growth is something that is said as being a goal in terms of sustainable development when you stress the development part of this sustainable development. And but of course, we know today that this growth model can be also in conflict, very strong conflict with other goals, like the goals to conserve a natural equilibrium, which are today disrupted by what we call the Anthropocene. That means that the fact that human beings are now having an impact on the Earth that is exceeding the capacity of the Earth to absorb this influence of human beings. And the notion of energy, of the philosophy of energy, is to look at this concept of sustainability and Anthropocene from the perspective of energy, from the perspective of the phenomenology of energy, the anthropology of energy, and even the metaphysics of energy. So the notion of the anthropology of energy is a notion of the individual amount of energy which is used by a person, and the difference between which amount of energy that can be used by a person per year and what will be actually sustainable for the global goal of achieving climate justice and climate sustainability, and trying to not exceed the goal of 2 degrees more in the coming years, which is also part of the Paris Agreement. So just to give a very simple example, if you look at the satisfaction of basic needs in terms of energy. So if you look at this, we know that to achieve this for each person per year, you have to have an energy content of about 3 to 4 gigajoules. And today, in developed society, what you have is a per capita use of energy of 300 gigajoules, which means 300 times more than what will be required only to satisfy basic needs at the energy level, which is very interesting that now you can quantify these things, and between the difference between the necessity in terms of energy consumption at the individual level in terms of basic needs and what we're actually consuming in our contemporary developed society, we have this big discrepancy. And of course, philosophy of energy is trying to understand this discrepancy and how we can reduce this discrepancy to achieve sustainability. So this is how you connect energy to sustainability in a very, I would say, anthropological and individual quantitative way to frame the problem.
Thank you very much, Jean-Yves, for your thoughts and your additional points and comments that actually goes beyond your own paper. So that's very good. It's the objective of this conversation. I would like to give the floor now to Alexander from People's Friendship University in Moscow, Russia, with your own comments. Thank you. You are muted, Alexander.
Okay. Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Paolo. Thank you, colleagues, for participation in this meeting. It's very interesting to hear different views of this very interesting topic, I think. My article was concerning problems of nuclear power plant, the challenge of cross-border negotiation to balance economic development and environmental protection. So it's this balance is also one of the side of the sustainable development in this sphere. It's very interesting questions that Paolo put for us. So firstly, I would like to say that yes, in general, nuclear power really do and will do a lot for achievement of sustainable development goals in general, and also for combat with climate change, firstly. Secondly, I should say that if we look to this, as was mentioned by Jean-Yves, 17 SDGs, we see that actually in general, as was also mentioned by International Atomic Energy Agency, this kind of energy could help in achievement of, for example, SDG 2, zero hunger, or for example, with SDG 7 concerning clean energy, especially SDG 13, climate change, and in general SDG 17, partners for the goals. But when we're speaking about the problem of nuclear power plant and Paris Agreement, and also SDG 13, I mean climate action, we should mention that it's kind of a tricky situation. Because in general, everybody knows that power plant gives zero of greenhouse gases. But when we look into the procedure, how developed the nuclear power plant, during this procedure, yes, it's a lot of greenhouse gases goes to the atmosphere. But when it stands and it's became operative, so it's zero emission. But when we look, so I was interested in this before, and I looked to the reports of the states concerning, you know, their reports under the Paris Agreement and their reports under the SDGs. And not every state mentioned about the nuclear power. That when they would like to say that they achieve goals. For example, Belarus. And my article actually concerned the Belarus first nuclear plant. They mention it, so that they built the first nuclear power plant, and it will help them with combating climate change. But some states do not mention it. If we look to the statistics, for example, we see that now we have approximately 450 nuclear power reactors in 32 countries. And if you look to the perspective, it will be more and more according to the statistics from International Atomic Energy Agency. It will be another 50 nuclear reactors in 19 countries. So it will be more and more. And today, if we look to the statistics, we have 10% of the world electricity. It's belong to nuclear energy. And in my opinion, it will be growing and growing. And also we have some countries, for example, like France, Jean-Yves, you're from France, if I may mention France, yeah. So I think France is a leader. It's more than 70% of electricity comes from nuclear energy. Or for example, Hungary, also a member of European Union, it's more than 50% coming from the nuclear energy. So it depends from the country and from their development. So in my opinion, nuclear energy will grow in the forthcoming years. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Alexander. I would like to give the floor now to Barbara from Kazakh German University in Almaty in Kazakhstan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question and for the opportunity to discuss today. I think indeed it's an extremely interesting red line through our different research to look at the relevance for the achievement of sustainable development, not necessarily only goals, because the goals are now for 2030, but generally how our perspectives which we look in our research, how they are related to sustainable development. So I was working, and I'm still doing, on one of the world's largest inland body of waters. And for the geographers, the answer should be easy. It's a Caspian Sea, which is a very, that's the internal inland body of water of almost 400,000 square kilometers. It's saline. On the other side, it's extremely polluted and very rich in natural resources. So when you want to think about the sustainable development and the goals, which now the 5 Caspian countries, they put in front of them, that's very challenging, because all of the 17 issues you probably find in the region, which is driven by the process of state building after the Soviet Union has collapsed and new countries have emerged there. But also at the same time, when you think about the extreme problems related to the pollution of this water body, and when you think about the goal 14 of life beyond water, if you want. So when you look at the climate change and think about all of the emission which comes out of the extraction, exploration, exploitation of the oil and gas resources, largely placed in this region. At the same time, I just want to mention that as you know, after this, the Soviet Union collapsed, it was only now already 3 years ago that the legal status of the Caspian Sea has been defined, and there was a common agreement after almost 30 years when the countries came to the conclusion how to divide this water body and how to cooperate. So if we want to speak about sustainable development again and the peace at least, in the goal 16, that's a good example of this, how long it can take really to arrive at the stable institutions, to arrive at the peaceful solutions. However, lucky enough, we did not have any armed conflict, if you want so, and escalations in the region, apart maybe of some others. But now, since the climate is changing and the whole region is severely impacted by the climate change, now the new regulations from 2018 is a good sign for lowering the poverty in the region, because many people are dependent on the fishing. If this body of water gets salinized, ecosystem changes, if it gets polluted, fishes will die out, and it will be the one of the many reasons for answering to Sustainable Development Goal 1 when you speak about poverty, 2 when you speak about hunger, and health issues when you speak about the pollution. So sounds like a very specific example, but I think that water bodies, I mean, they are very crucial really to understand the interplay of all the Sustainable Development Goals, and especially if we speak about the Paris Agreement now, and we think how much efforts the countries, especially those developing countries which the region of Caspian Sea presents, how much efforts they need to take to meet the expectations of the global community, and also to figure out how to set up their NDCs, national determined contributions, to answer to the energy-driven national economics, which we actually have the case in all of the Caspian countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. As you can see, every one of you is bringing a very different perspective and points on our panel on strategies to balance energy security, business, trade, and sustainable development. But let's move on a next questions. Again, I would like that every panelist would give his own perspective on this question as well. What is your opinion about the roles that the business sector, civil society, or international organization can play for striking a balance among energy security and environmental protection? I will give the floor now on to Alexander, just to change the order we use for the first question, and then we move from there. Thank you very much.
Paolo, I have a question here in chat box. Shall I answer now or later? What do you think?
I will take care of it. Let's start with the question, and if you want the question I've just asked you, and then if you think you have the time to integrate questions coming from the chat, please feel free to do so. But I would focus now on the questions for every speaker. Thank you.
Oh, okay, Paolo. So thank you for the question. So you mentioned, as I understand, the role of business sector, yes, civil society, international organization in a sphere of our interest. So firstly, I would like to mention that in my field of interest, I mean nuclear energy, business sector, yes, plays a big role now. But it's from one side, it's good for the development and for sustainable development. But from another side, it could be dangerous. Also, with the problem of liability, for example, as was after the tragedy in Japan, because from one side, nuclear energy controlled by state, and especially by international organization, International Atomic Energy Agency. But from another side, operator, usually business structure, working together, like joint stock companies, yes, together with, maybe with capital from states. So and if any problem, it could be also problem with liability, because it really costs a lot. If we speak about, it's good, but it could be dangerous, my statement. And secondly, if we speak about civil society, I should mention, yes, that's really important, and actually that was one of idea in the article, because civil society is very good in a process of discussion, the construction of a, during the construction of a nuclear plant, during the discussion or issue of disposal of nuclear wastes, etc. And also in environmental impact assessment procedure, especially when it could have transboundary effect, like was also in this case with nuclear plant in Belarus, because it's from one side it's on the state of Belarus, but from another side it's like only 40 kilometers from the capital of the Lithuania, so it's really very near. And because of this was starting procedure of transboundary impact assessment, and civil society really plays a big role, also NGO, in negotiation via different non-complaints procedure, Aarhus Convention, ESPO Convention. So yes, on this stage, on this question, the roles of civil society, in my idea, it's really important. And if we speak also about, just to summarize, the role of international organization in this very dangerous sector, it's very important because International Atomic Energy Agency really controls a lot, and also European Union did a lot. For example, if we speak about our case, I'm in preparing for today's discussion, I'm just look at the news concerning my case, and I see that it was special visit of European Union to Belarus concerning stress test, because it was the first circle. So the power plant starts November last year, and now they're preparing for the second circle. So international organizations may come to verify, and so their role is really great. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. If you also want to say a few words about the question in the chat, I will read it. Do you see any prospects of switching civil nuclear power plants to thorium-filled nuclear power?
Okay, thank you. Yes, it's thank you for the question. Maybe it's only also Jean-Yves could add something from the idea of philosophy of energy. So it's really very interesting to listen, because it's something new for me as a lawyer to hear about metaphysics of energy. So it's really very interesting, as Jean-Yves mentioned. In my opinion, so I'm not really big specialist in this sphere of thorium, but as I know, what I also read before, so on one side, yes, it's in terms of sustainability of energy, as we speak today, yes, it's important to think about it. But from another side, now, in terms of economic, it's not possible, because it's not cheap. So in terms of economy, economically, it looks like thorium is not interesting until the cost of kilogram of uranium will be more than $300 US. So it's a economic idea, and it's one of the big steps. Even some countries which already used thorium, they have problem. For example, India. So it's not easy, but maybe in future, yeah, it could be good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me go back to the original questions also for the other speaker. This is the second question in the round for everyone. Again, what is your opinion about the roles that the business sector, civil society, or international organization can play for striking a balance among energy security and environmental protection? I would like to give the floor to Barbara, if she's okay with that. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. With pleasure. Once again, referring to Caspian Sea, I mentioned that it's not only one of the biggest, one of the richest places in terms of development of energy resources like oil and gas. At the same time, it's one of the richest body of water for very rarely met species, for example, like sturgeon. And the balance is crucial. And when I want to think about civil society engagement, when I maybe let's start first from the business part. I mean, first of all, that's the exploitation, and that's driven by certainly by economical benefits, which led to overexploitation and to habitat destruction and to pollution of the maritime environment of the Caspian Sea. And many of the species which were there are not anymore there. What was the answer? The answer was the first time on the side of intergovernmental organizations. You mentioned what is the balance and how those three players can achieve this balance. There were many international partners, starting from UNEP, UNDP, World Bank, GEF. All of them were investing and even came together in 2000. Actually, at the beginning of this discussion, actually 1998, to create so-called Caspian Environmental Program. That was like an umbrella, a regional umbrella for taking up the questions related to the destroyed environment and setting up a platform of communication. And there was a great success after a few years. So already in 2003, there was a framework convention, so-called Tehran Convention on Environment Protection of the Caspian Sea signed. And this was thanks to first of all, the very committed coordination of the international organizations to give the good examples, best practices, and funds, and also infrastructure to the countries to come together. And after this convention, which took quite many years to come into force, 3 years, but then right after there was a number of protocols. The country started working on the land-based pollution, on the oil pollution, on the biodiversity. Now they work on the monitoring, assessment, and information exchange. So all of that was pushed by, so to say, business idea, which brought to the unfortunate deterioration. Then the international community input through the international organizations. But last, but really very not least, the extremely important role of NGOs and civil society. I would say even one of the key roles to advance environmental concerns, and at all in the Caspian region, all of the country, formation of civil discourse and the democratic structures. Because once again, if I may remind you that those countries are very young in their so-called, new systems which are partly democratic. So waking up the idea and serving the idea to strengthen civil society is basically to build up the governmental structure, the social structures and social discourse about those very critical issues: environment and economy, how they play together. Economy mainly based on energy. So I think that those three actors, stakeholders, and striking the balance between those two, environment and economy, in the Caspian Sea are crucial. And I'm sure we could name much more examples from the other areas of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you very much for this insightful overview on this area. I would like to give the floor now to Jean-Yves Heurtebise again for his own thoughts and comments. You need again to unmute yourself, Jean-Yves.
Yeah, sure. So perhaps again, thank you, Paolo, for the question. So perhaps again, I also would like to to go back to what Alexander just said about nuclear power and climate goals. And because here we know that we have a deep kind of contradiction. And if, for example, I look at, you have a debate recently between the two candidates for becoming the candidate for the presidential election in the Green Party, and both of them in France say that they are against nuclear power. Just the first one say we have to stop now, the other say we have to stop in 20 years. And of course, here that means that the connection is inside the Green Party, inside the Green, the perception of how to achieve the sustainable goal of reducing CO2. Perhaps we can say that nuclear power is perhaps not enough considered in terms of the green politics, in terms of political representation. And also in terms of energy security, we know that the fact that, for example, Germany decided to suspend more or less its nuclear operation, it has some geopolitical consequences regarding, Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And so a lot of geopolitical implication too with Russia, as you know, which is also a consequence of Germany deciding to, in some sense, giving up most of its nuclear power, and France being kind of more and more alone in Europe in this future. And of course, this is also important because when we look at this concept of energy and link to the Anthropocene, generally speaking, people speaking about the Anthropocene in terms of energy, they will call that the Petrocene. I mean petrol and scene, so Anthropocene and Petrocene. So like the moment of the age of fossil fuels and especially of oil. And this is also, just before I was speaking about philosophy of energy, metaphysics of energy, you can also speak about culture and energy, because the thing is that our modern culture is completely developed on the basis of energy, which is not renewable. And we have developed a kind of petro-culture too. And so this is a lot of people today, they try to understand the concept of energy in terms of its cultural implication. So we have a culture of oil use, we have a culture of gas use, and we have a whole culture based on non-renewable energy use. And so the shift from non-renewable energy to renewable energy is not only a shift in terms of technology, it is also a shift in terms of culture, in terms of political assumptions. And it's a very complex framework. So in terms of company and in terms of business, I think it is also important to remind that, as it has been stressed by Bonneuil and Frezos in the book Shock of Anthropocene, as we know, 90 corporations are responsible for 63% of cumulative emission of carbon dioxide and methane between 1850 and now. So 90 corporations, 63% of cumulative emission. And so we can see here the importance of this business company. And even more recently, it has been found that more than half of global industrial emission since 1988 can be traced to 25 corporate and state-owned entities. So here, I'm speaking also about state-owned entities and not purely a business, but here you can see that all this issue of energy and how it is linked to CO2 in a lot, a very important part of it is linked, can be traced back to very small amounts of company. We have a huge impact on the planet as a whole. And here this is very important when you discuss about civil society and especially individual action that are possible to what you can do as an individual level, and the discrepancy again, the difference, the hiatus, the gap between this individual capacity and the action on global companies on this CO2 emissions. So here you have also something very important in terms of quantitative impact, quantitative responsibility to take into consideration when you discuss about a business level and civil society level. Quantitatively speaking, we are not speaking exactly of things happening at the same level in terms of quantity of emissions, in terms also of quantity of power of action. And so this is especially if we think in terms of lobbying, the capacity of business sector to lobby international organization, and the capacity of civil society to lobby international organization. You have two also different track on to better, how we say, balance the power of these two kind of entity and the asymmetries that exist today. And we can believe that a better symmetry will be also a way to achieve sustainable goals in terms of business sector and civil society impact on the climate and our sustainable objectives. Yes, so that will be my answer.
Thank you, Jean-Yves. Thank you, Jean-Yves. And that gives me also the possibility to make myself some comments, because matters such as business and trade has been especially important for energy development. So the relation between business and trade and how the business get involved and helps for energy development is essential. It is through the private sector investments that energy exploration activity are occurring, for example, and more specifically, in very extreme environments, such as the Arctic or the high seas. So, of course, there is different opinion on these matters, because several commentators and experts would say that you should not even go there. You should not go in the Arctic. You should not go in the deep seas, because you are going to affect the earth, the nature, and the biodiversity. But this is happening, and indeed, companies like British Petroleum, as a big financial capital, that have paved the road to the exploitation of conventional energy sources in area where such exploration was not even possible a few years ago. And once again, certain people would say, fortunately, it was not possible. But these companies can be also the ones that make the breakthrough in renewable energy in the future, given the huge capital they possess, because it's extremely expensive the startup for starting renewable energies in any subfield of renewable energy is extremely expensive. So only companies that can meet this expectation are able then to stay in the market, being competitive. And we perfectly know how the market on renewable energy is also extremely competitive, not only in Europe and US, but in China and in other places. And companies like British Petroleum, I cited before, has initiated new campaign in recent years called Beyond Petroleum, where the purpose is to start investing in renewable energy sources. And this is a good news. So this special issue and the various cases, those papers we are presenting, those debate we are having with all of you are just a part. I didn't mention at the beginning of the presentation that the special issue is totally open access, offered by Oxford University Press for the time up to this meeting today, and for a few more days and weeks maybe. And so there is an opportunity for those who are interested to read the additional papers. So for today, we are just covering some of the aspects. And once again, other cases cover this type of areas in our analysis. Now I would like to give the floor to Daria to conclude with her points of view on this second question before moving to the next questions. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Paolo. I would also like to step back to the WTO and especially to jurisprudence of the dispute settlement body of the WTO, because from the one hand, this is the organ of international organization, but from the other hand, usually there are producers, meaning business entities, behind each dispute which is at issue, which is resolved by the dispute settlement body of the WTO. Therefore, addressing its jurisprudence, we can look whether WTO can find this difficult balance between trade in energy and environmental protection, between social interests and commercial interests. And I would make only one example when this balance between trade in energy and environmental protection was addressed by the WTO dispute settlement body. It's Canada Renewable Energy case. And this conclusion of the dispute settlement body of the WTO can be regarded as an example of WTO contribution to find balance between energy security and environmental protection. In this case, the appellate body found that the panel was mistaken in using the market for electricity generated from all sources of energy as a relevant market for comparison in determining benefit to define existence of subsidy in this case. And the appellate body considered that producers of wind and solar generated electricity did not compete with the other electricity producers because of the differences in cost structures and in operating costs. So the relevant market, according to the dispute settlement body of the WTO, for the benefit of comparison was the market solely for wind and solar generated electricity. So the dispute settlement body decided to compare, let's say, environment markets which in its sense, in its nature, were created for environmental protection and not to compare with other markets which are not focused on protection of the environment. So this could be regarded as a so-called ecocentric, but not economic-centric approach to the settlement of the dispute in this particular case. So it's a kind of an example how international organization may contribute to this balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Daria. Let me add one thing. Some of you have also already talked about the role of civil society and environmental organization, but I would like just to stress it, connected to what each one of you has said, that its role, the role of a civil society environmental organization, is extremely important. It's a role of onlookers to play and monitor that states and the private sector and companies' action are always trying to strike a balance among diverging interests of business, human rights, and environmental protection. So I wanted just to add these words to say that the role of civil society is extremely important in this sense to try to find to strike a balance among the diverging needs and diverging interests. I would like to move now to the third question for all the panelists. Which are your suggestions for alternative and national-based approach to the energy transition? There are research of innovative solutions in the management of shared natural resources, the use of conventional and unconventional energy sources, and also if you can frame the challenges of the energy transition. All this in a very short time, because we are approaching to the end of this panel, to our time, so we have 12 minutes. I would say that every speaker take 2 minutes to reply to this question. Thank you. And I will start with Barbara now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me be very brief to save the time. Indeed, maybe let me just start with the challenges. I mean, somehow the region of the Caspian Sea, or many other countries, probably also worldwide, which are driven by this traditional energy resources associated with oil and gas production, they have a very big trouble on many levels to transit to different type of energy. For example, in the Caspian Sea, the oil production accounts for around between 3 and 4%, depending on the different sources of information, and the same for gas production worldwide reserves. So that's really pretty lot. And in this sense, of course, countries, they just take a quick benefit out of this, what they used to do for many years, develop, and which brings a quick benefit. But at the same time, we can see in the region that there are tremendous wind, solar, and hydropower potential, especially the hydropower, which by now you can say it's untapped. And again, when you turn even to think about our first question about sustainable development, and now the question, what makes it challenging to the country, you see that there is actually there is no awareness. There is still probably too little knowledge, too little access to modern technology. Even if you think that it could create new jobs, that could help the countries again coming out from the poverty for many people. And at the same time, we think that it could address pollution, the emission, the lower greenhouse gases, right? So all the big goals which we have now in the global policy, and those countries have it. They also have a big problem with the energy generation in general, where when the transition to the renewable energy resources could help to better survive. We also see even in the region, in countries like Kazakhstan, that the price for installation and the managing of renewable energies is basically lower, even if when using the traditional energy resources. So there is a big question behind why. And this is really not only the question about energy, it's the question about society. And as we mentioned in the second, our questions, they are very well connected to each other, I feel. And that's a question in the stage, in the structures of the state, in the development of a country, of the statehood, and development of a society, of those people who will have offer a multiple voice and multi-stakeholder approach to take the decision, to accept new solution, and strive for new perspectives. I think all of that has to be in place to speak about energy transition in this region, at least, but I think globally the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Daria, would you like to take the floor to give your own response and comments?
Thank you, Paolo. Directly addressing this question, but from the perspective of legal regulation of trade in electricity as a kind of energy, it should be noted that electricity transition is often governed by domestic legislation of the states. Thus, the extent to which international law and WTO in particular may influence energy transition is questionable. At the same time, WTO law can be relevant to trade in energy between particular PTA, preferential trade agreements, like Eurasian Economic Union, member states, and third parties and third-party countries. However, for instance, members to the Eurasian Economic Union, who are at the same time WTO members, they didn't make any commitments with respect to export of electricity tariffs during the negotiation process of accession to the WTO. As for the most favored nation and national treatment obligations, importation of electricity from the Eurasian Economic Union, again, for instance, to third countries, may face problem of likeness determination as soon as such electricity becomes produced from both conventional and renewable sources. It's not possible to separate these different kinds of electricity in terms of process and production method. Therefore, reliance on the WTO law and jurisprudence for interpretation of rules of the PTAs, including rules of the Eurasian Economic Union governing trade in electricity, is very limited. And such a limitation is inferred from specific technical characteristics of electricity and from which differs electricity from other types of energy goods, energy in general and energy goods in particular. However, the outcome of this challenge could be the creation of common market of electricity within the EU, and as a result, WTO law and other regulation which we have on the multilateral level can influence somehow contribute to creation of more or less unified legal regime and more effective regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Daria. I would like to give the floor to Jean-Yves. You needed to unmute yourself again.
Yeah, I know. So thank you, Paolo, for the question. And yes, so actually I cannot develop in the paper. I try to propose something about this specific question, and based on Piketty notion of war tax and how you could have a kind of war tax in terms of energy, and a war tax calculated on the basis of energy per capita use. But it's something that it is in the paper, so perhaps I don't need to develop here. I would like perhaps to go back to the problem of the, as you say, Paolo, the problem of the exploitation of the riches, of the resources of the polar regions. And here again, you have a very kind of paradoxical situation where climate change is contributing to making access to resources that can, in some sense, also continue to contribute to the worsening of climate change, or perhaps try to provide another path towards sustainability. But at the same time, when you say beyond petroleum, again, it's kind of quantitative problem. How much beyond petroleum is in BP? So quantitatively speaking, in terms of subsidies, in terms of the part of renewable energy, that the investment in renewable energy in the company compared to investment in other non-renewable sector. And so I think it's always this problem of the difference between the quantitative aspect of the issue, even if you can have goals and discourses in terms of this sustainability. How much do you invest in terms of, relatively speaking? So yeah, so and just to finish on that, in terms of energy, you know, in the 1970s, there was kind of issues or preoccupation about the fact that we will have one day a shortage of energy. But today, it seems that the problem is not that we won't have enough energy resources, but actually that we have actually too much of it, and perhaps we need to not exploit them and not to try to find more of them. And so it's kind of a very different approach to say, oh, we don't have enough energy resource and you have to find more, or actually we have already enough and we don't have to continue to exploit some of them. And so it's a very different approach. Yes.
Thank you, Jean-Yves. Thank you, Jean-Yves. You really help to see how it's really difficult and complicated to strike the balance among different interests and different needs. If I can also add a few comments from my side, we need really to balance these pressures and these needs that each one of you has described, and also what the Anthropocene urgently requires. And it requires a complete change of perspective on energy and on a theoretical framework to understand these challenges. The earth has to be less exploited and more respected and protected. Further, we cannot avoid to mention what has been going on for the last 2 years. The extremely painful health crisis of COVID-19 is currently showing the world that the paradigm should really shift towards sustainability. And it's not really possible to have economic growth in the long term if human activities interfere so much with the earth and its habitat without constraints and limitation. If industrialization and expansion of the city are done in such a manner that affect the forest, the flora, and the fauna, then the nature might ultimately and unpredictably respond with more and more visible negative effects on our human society, with a spillover effect that cannot be even imaged right now, like it was for COVID-19, that it came out for the non-expert as a surprise. So cities, and for me also when we are talking before about civil society or non-governmental institution, the cities are not government. They are of course part of the government, but they are in the definition of multi-level, multi-scalar, a component of sub-roles that has huge importance, because certain cities are as big as certain countries around the world. So cities must really become smart and environmentally sounding for permitting all of us a sustainable future. And of course, you, Jean-Yves and others made reference also to investment and striking the balance with the funding available. We don't have only the investment issues and the trade issues. We have, of course, also the economic growth beside the environmental protection and the need for security. Energy security, of course, is extremely important in this picture, because no country has a real full national security without having a full and strong energy security. I also give now the floor to Alexander for his own comments, and we are getting to the end of this panel. Thank you, Alexander. And you need to unmute yourself. Well, it likes that Alexander is frozen. Probably it blocked. So I would probably then ended up this panel, apart if there are any other comments from the other speakers, because we have been all of us say many things. If there is any last words from anyone, and then I can conclude this panel. Anyone would like to add something, Daria or Barbara or Jean-Yves? If not, then I thank all the panelists. I thank the Society of International Economic Law for this platform. As I mentioned before, the publication with Oxford is fully available to anyone, free access for a few more days, I guess. This recording is going to be made available on the SIEL YouTube. And so we remain available for additional conversation with anyone who is going to watch this recording later, or anyone is going to read the publication. Our emails and contacts are easily traceable and foundable online, and they're also in the articles of the publication. So if anyone then show an interest and would like to give us comments at a later time, we remain available. One more time, thank you to Maria Laura and the rest of the people in the Society of International Economic Law, and thank you for those who attend this meeting, and I wish you a great rest of the day. Thank you very much.